The promise of equal access to justice has been a core American value since our country's founding. Yet 92% of low-income Americans' legal needs are not met on life-changing issues involving civil law. Americans like the veteran who's been denied the disability benefits he's rightfully earned, the woman pleading for protection from an abusive partner, or the family facing foreclosure or eviction from their home. That's why for 50 years, Legal Services Corporation and our local partners have worked to narrow this justice gap. LSC is the single largest funder of civil legal aid in America. In 2022, our grantees provided legal advice and representation to 1.8 million people, including more than 780,000 children. Join us in protecting the promise by learning more and signing the pledge to support LSC and its mission. Together, we can expand access to justice and opportunity for the millions of Americans who need it.
My name is John Levy, and it's my very distinct privilege to serve as the 10th chair of the Legal Services Corporation Board. And on behalf of our LSC board, all of whom are here with us today, I welcome you to this special forum on increasing access to justice. Thank you to our speakers and panelists for joining us, and the State Bar of Georgia for hosting us in this really terrific facility. I also want to thank my predecessor, the 9th chair of the LSC board, Atlanta's own Frank Strickland, former ABA president and LSC Leaders Council member Linda Klein, and Mike Monahan, State Bar of Georgia Pro Bono and Access to Justice Liaison, for their invaluable assistance in bringing us together and helping to get the word out about this forum. We are also grateful for the generous collaboration of the executive directors of our two fabulous grantees here in Georgia, Susan Coppage at Georgia Legal Services Program and Rita Sheffy at Atlanta Legal Aid Society. We'll be privileged today to hear remarks in a few minutes from Georgia Supreme Court Justice Verda Colvin, and later at our reception from former Georgia Governor Roy Barnes. Our program also features two panels. The first brings together some of Georgia's preeminent companies to discuss corporate perspectives on making justice a reality in our communities. LSC's remarkable president, Ron Flagg, will moderate. The second, hosted by LSC's Chief Data Officer, Holly Stevens, examines the impact of medical legal partnerships and features legal aid lawyers and a physician involved in Georgia's MLP projects. Well, we gather today as LSC marks its 50th anniversary year. On July 25 of 1974, Richard Nixon signed the LSC Act to help, and I quote Nixon, provide equal access to the system of justice in our nation and provide high-quality legal assistance to those who would otherwise be unable to afford legal counsel. Of the corporation the LSC Act created, Nixon said, "Here each day, the old, the unemployed, the underprivileged, the largely forgotten people of our nation may seek help." Well, 50 years later, they're still seeking help. And our LSC grantees across the country are providing it. In fact, these 5 decades, our extraordinary network of providers has helped nearly 75 million low-income Americans with their civil legal problems. 75 million. LSC's commemorating our milestone anniversary, as you saw, with an outreach campaign called Protecting the Promise. As a part of this 50th anniversary initiative, we recently commissioned a Harris poll about civil legal issues, and the results should be disturbing to all of us, even if they're hardly surprising. The survey found that more than half, still more than half of our countrymen, 56% mistakenly believe that they're entitled to free legal representation if they cannot afford a lawyer for civil matters, and 18% are unsure. Well, when you add them together, that's 3/4 of the population. And that number includes adults under 35 still holding this belief. So how are we educating our next generations about our justice system? And the poll also showed that 59% of people who experienced a civil legal matter within the past 3 years, they didn't seek out legal help from an attorney who could have been pivotal in getting their issues resolved. And that includes 82% of older Americans victims of scams or identity theft, 63% of people contacted by collection agencies or creditors, and 52% of natural disaster survivors. So that study clearly confirms and only deepens the findings of our most recent Justice Gap report from 2022, which revealed that low-income Americans do not receive any or enough legal help for 92% of their civil legal problems. 92%. And during the past decade, LSC's two outstanding grantees here in Georgia and LSC's 128 other grantees with 900 offices stretching across the country have worked so hard to increase state funding. They've expanded the use of kiosks, portals, justice buses. They've trained paraprofessionals. They've helped create easier to use court forms. They're developing ways to utilize the growing power of AI. And LSC's, by the numbers, the data underlying our legal aid programs recently released found, in fact, that LSC grantees are closing more cases, 771,000 cases in 2023, a 10-year high. Across the nation, they served nearly 2 million people. Here in Georgia, there are two grantees, one of them 23,000 cases, the other 55,000, a 19% increase from the previous year. Well, folks, imagine what our grantees here and across the country could do with anything approaching adequate funding if they were not forced to turn away as many eligible applicants as they can help because of a lack of resources. 30 years ago, Congress appropriated $400 million for LSC. So although we appreciate for this fiscal year, Congress maintained LSC's funding at $560 million, well, clearly much more is needed to close this significant justice gap after so many years of inadequate funding. That's why our bipartisan board voted unanimously just a few months ago to request from Congress $2.1 billion for LSC's fiscal year 2026 budget. Well, you can see what such an increase would do for LSC and its grantees. It would make a world of difference. And it would keep faith with the covenant that binds us together as Americans. As Linda Klein so succinctly put it, justice for all is not just a pretty phrase in the Pledge of Allegiance. It is a promise we make to every American. Well, much is at stake here, as Judge Louis Lyman of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York powerfully expressed at an LSC event just last year in New York City. And I quote the judge, "When the largest and most vulnerable segments of our society can no longer access the courts will cease to be instruments of justice to which those who are genuinely injured can turn to for redress. They become mediators only for the wealthy or for the government. The notion of equal justice for all, which is the bedrock for the rule of law, becomes an empty promise." So as we recognize LSC's 50th anniversary and 100 years for Atlanta Legal Aid, we must redouble our commitment and efforts with all of you to make sure that the promise of equal justice in America is not just an empty promise, but it's a fully realized one, a lived reality for all Americans. This crisis in access is happening right now on our watch, and as Judge Lyman put it so aptly, it puts the rule of law at risk. But the good news, it's a solvable crisis. We know how to solve it. With more money, trained paraprofessionals, AI, expanded tech, we can do this. And isn't it our responsibility to solve this crisis right now for future generations of Americans? It's happening on our watch. We've got to take it seriously and get this done now. Thank you very much. And it's now my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon, Justice Verda Colvin of the Georgia Supreme Court. Justice Colvin was appointed to the Georgia Supreme Court in July 2021 by Governor Brian Kemp. Justice Colvin previously served as the Georgia Court of on the Georgia Court of Appeals and as a Superior Court judge in Macon Judicial Circuit. She's a graduate of Sweetbriar College, and I just told her that my mother was as well. And she earned her Juris Doctorate from the University of Georgia School of Law. Well, prior to serving on the bench, she's had a distinguished career throughout Georgia, and a Solicitor General in Athens, Clark County, Assistant General Counsel to Clark Atlanta University, Assistant District County Attorney in Clayton County, and an Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Middle District of Georgia. You've been busy. In addition to her judicial responsibilities, Justice Colvin is deeply committed to service and leadership in the community, and the Justice, in her spare time, currently chairs Georgia's Access to Justice Commission. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your clearly busy schedule. It's truly a privilege to welcome you here today. Please join me in welcoming Verda.
Well, we really could go to the panel after Mr. Levy's remarks. I was thinking, he stole that. So I'm so pleased to be here with you this afternoon as we honor the efforts of Georgia Legal Services, Legal Aid as well, and the founder, Legal Services Corporation. I bring you greetings on behalf of Chief Justice Boggs. He and I both share a deep commitment to access to justice because we feel like to ensure that those who have less never feel less than, we have to be committed to true access to justice. I must say, happy anniversary to Legal Services Corporation. You have continually ensured the promise of justice for 50 years. That promise has allowed GLS to have the financial assistance as well as legal aid necessary to help millions. During President Johnson's tenure, as Mr. Levy mentioned, the war on poverty prompted the government to envision providing civil legal assistance to low-income Americans. President Nixon's willingness to sign the law creating Legal Services Corporation has enabled this founder to continue your unyielding commitment to those who have less, but whose rights are no less important. You have held to Learned Hand's statement made at the Legal Aid Society of New York in 1951, "Thou shalt not ration justice." Your commitment to the last 50 years, LSC, has saved countless people throughout the United States. Thank you for standing in the gap to ensure that justice and access to justice is a reality. Preambles throughout America's history mandate that there is no they or them, only us. And all of us shall, and that's my own word, shall, have access to justice. That can only be accomplished when all people can readily redress their civil legal problems. I pledge allegiance are the beginning words to our vow, our promise, if you will, to ensure liberty and justice for all. Additionally, the preamble to the United States Constitution states, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice." Justice is the hallmark of our democracy. Even in the Georgia Constitution, we declare to perpetuate the principles of free government, ensure justice to all. We, the people of Georgia, do ordain and establish. As chair of the Judicial Council of Georgia's Access to Justice Committee, I am not just simply a figurehead on a committee. I am a committed advocate to ensure the quest that every Georgian has real access to justice, because all people have equal worth. Along with me are the real heroes: Tabitha Ponder, the staff and director of Access to Justice; Michelle Barclay, the assistant director of AOC; and of course, the director, Cynthia Clanton, who we know as C. We are fortunate to have Georgia Legal Services and Legal Aid to meet the needs of economically disadvantaged Georgians who are facing civil issues that they're unable to navigate themselves. GLS could never assist those who need them most without the funding of the single largest founder of civil legal aid for low-income Americans, LSC. We, every citizen of Georgia, owes all of these entities, LSC, GLS, and Legal Aid, a debt of gratitude for epitomizing the true calling of the legal profession, and that is service. And I do this often. Sometimes I leave my notes and I have to say this. The most important thing for us who stand as attorneys is service. And service is not what you're paid for, it's what you're made of when you lend your talents, your gifts to those who could never afford to hire you as an attorney. So I just want to say thank you for what you do, because it matters. In March of this year, United Way Atlanta reported that 34% of Georgians are ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, and employed, which causes them and their families to live beneath the threshold of financial survival. Furthermore, it was reported that approximately 530,000 families live in poverty. Combined, that means that 47% of Georgia households live below the ALICE threshold. That so moved me that I researched it 3 times because I could not believe that number. But the number is real. 47% of Georgia households live below the ALICE threshold. As of October 18th, the last time I refreshed my notes, that would be approximately 1,789,604 Georgians. So while in 2021, 2022, the number of households in poverty decreased by 13%, in 2024, ALICE Update Report noted that ALICE households increased by more than 65,000. Every single day, Georgia Legal Services and Legal Aid meet ALICE. She is the mom seeking to ensure that she maintains housing when the eviction notice is looming because the business where she labors had to close for a month. She is a wife with 4 kids who finally seeks assistance when the domestic violence she experiences begins to expand to her children. ALICE is even the man who just lost his job that supports his ill wife and their 2 children. A Georgian's instability does not rob him or her of the promise that we made collectively: justice for all. This is not just a concept that sounds good. It is the basis of a true democracy. Justice for all, access to justice and increasing justice for every Georgian is a mirror that is turned facing each of us, not them. And just as each of you with GLS, LSC, and legal aid answer the call every single day, the rest of us in this legal community and our commercial neighbors must lend a hand and resources to ensure, no, demand, that assets are garnered to continue the work and expand the work to increase access to justice. Imagine, if you will, Georgia without Georgia Legal Services, without legal aid. Imagine the needs of 60% of Georgians living paycheck to paycheck, and the one unplanned expense away from financial crisis only grows. And 92% of their substantial civil legal problems get no legal help or very little help. In 2023, 55,176 low-income adults and children sought and received legal assistance from GLS. And I understand from Mr. Levy, over 23,000 sought that assistance from legal aid. That's more than 9,000 additional clients in 1 year just for GLS. This fact illustrates that the civil needs of the working poor are increasing. What might the lives of each of those individuals who have been served by these great institutions look like today if they weren't here? Simply put, these millions of individuals' needs would not have been met. Families would have lost their homes, custody of their children, experienced instability in their families, and a host of other calamities if not for Georgia Legal Services and legal aid, and most of all, their founder, LSC. They're meeting the needs, particularly GLS, in 154 counties in Georgia. Let's be frank. The civil legal needs of residents in 154 of the 159 counties in Georgia is simply overwhelming. Our legal deserts are a serious concern in Georgia. As of November 2023, there are 7 counties with not one lawyer. 7. Can you imagine what it means to someone struggling to make ends meet while facing a dire civil legal need? Imagine still this person struggling to make ends meet with no transportation to get to the next county over to see the 1 or 2 attorneys there. Imagine further that this individual doesn't have the money to consult an attorney. Georgia Legal Services and legal aid stand in that gap. We are grateful to you and to LSC. In Georgia, we have 64 counties with 10 or less attorneys. That's 64 counties out of 159 counties. 64 out of 159 counties. We're better than that. And I'm gonna go off my notes. We're number 1 in business. How can we have 69 counties out of 159 with 10 or less attorneys? 22 counties have more than 10 attorneys, but less than 25 attorneys. If you're outside of Metro Atlanta, you're without. We certainly have much to do to achieve justice for all. It was reported in March of this year that of Georgia's 20 most common occupations, 65% of those paid less than $20 per hour in 2021. It hadn't gotten much better. Georgia Legal Services and legal aid meets the needs of those represented in these occupations every single day. However, the legal profession must combine its efforts with both of these institutions to ensure greater access to justice for more Georgians. We are committed, and we must be committed to increasing access to justice in all that we do, and there are currently efforts underway to do so. We have 2 self-help centers in Georgia, the Family Law Information Center in Northeast Georgia and the Southwest Georgia Legal Self-Help Center located in Albany, some people say Albany, Georgia. These 2 entities were implemented because officials and the communities saw self-represented litigants unsuccessfully struggle to gain access to justice. The first one created, the Family Law Information Center, was established by Chief Judge Brenda Weaver in Northeast Georgia. She saw people in her courtroom unrepresented, not by choice, but simply because of their lot in life. They were simply unable to financially secure the legal assistance needed to address the civil issues affecting the well-being of their families. Judge Weaver sought to do something to help because she recognized that legal aid and Georgia Legal Services couldn't do it all. She implemented a system using navigators to assist self-represented litigants who plan to represent themselves in divorce or legitimation cases. GLS alone cannot meet the needs of the 47% of Georgians who are financially insecure, even with significant funding from LSC. The Southwest Georgia Legal Self-Help Center, located in Albany, employs staff to provide free procedural information to the public. This center was born by the Justice for All Working Group, a component of the Georgia Access to Justice. It was designed as a pilot program for the state of Georgia after determining the need for consumers facing civil legal issues. While the staff does not provide legal advice, it does provide forms and information for navigating the court system, in addition to providing access to the internet for Georgians to access justice. GLS, you are not alone. Legal aid, you are not alone. LSC, I understand completely as the chair of the Judicial Council for Georgia's Access to Justice Committee that your funding is not a silver bullet. It can't be. Many hands make light work. We must all lend a hand. Chief Justice Boggs has now created, just recently, within the last week and a half, the Supreme Court Committee on Legal Regulatory Reform, which includes members of the State Bar, of which I will be an ex officio member as the chair for Access to Justice. Its purpose is to determine how we can reform regulations related to the practice of law to provide more assistance to those who need legal representation. I am always pushing, always pushing. There is also a new committee to examine AI, and there indeed may be possibilities in that area. Others also observed our need to do more. Every day during Judge Bill Adams' 19 years as a state court judge in Bibb County, he saw citizens in Middle Georgia desperately trying to navigate the court system with no representation. Not because they did not desire representation, but because they could not afford an attorney. And even if they could muster the finances to seek inexpensive counsel, they didn't know where to begin. Instead of retiring to constant relaxation, Judge Adams established Middle Georgia Justice. He founded the Middle Georgia Justice in 2017 to provide legal assistance to low-income working people in Middle Georgia. They began work in 2018, enlisting attorney volunteers. Middle Georgia Justice now has staff attorneys who actually assist clients in completing family and probate forms, and they represent clients with legal issues. Additionally, Middle Georgia Justice assists patrons with criminal history relief. These are just a few of the ways other entities are assisting low-income Georgians. But the efforts haven't stopped there. We see that self-help centers with navigators are effective, even though they're not perfect, but they help citizens determine the steps necessary to even address their civil issues. So now, our committee is making efforts to ensure that there are several self-help centers in every corner of Georgia. And this will increase access to justice and ensure that citizens have a bridge, at least, to addressing their civil needs, which are now going unresolved. So we are now working with the Carl Vinson Institute of Government to develop data from our existing self-help centers to make the case to our legislators that an investment in ensuring access to justice benefits the state of Georgia, and more importantly, economically disadvantaged Georgians everywhere throughout our state. But our efforts don't stop there. We have created forms for divorces with and without children, legitimation, and updated landlord-tenant forms that can be easily read by everyday citizens. And we have almost completed a form for child custody. But the efforts still don't stop there. There is currently an effort underway to develop kiosks, which will also navigate users to address their civil legal issues. All of these efforts are being pursued because the Judicial Council and the State Bar of Georgia's Access to Justice committees recognize that legal services and Georgia Legal Services, as well as Georgia Legal Services Corporation, cannot be our only answer for ensuring justice for all. I am so glad to hear Mr. Levy said that more money will be asked from our Congress, but our state can do more, and we must do more. And so with all of these efforts being made and the phenomenal work that you do every single day, we recognize you need a partner with you to ensure access to justice. We also recognize that we must move beyond and outside of our legal silos, as many of those with civil needs don't even realize their problems are legal matters. And we will continue looking for ways to do so. There is much to do, but we will not falter or relax in ensuring justice for all people. Georgia Legal Services, legal aid, and legal corporation services, the work that you do every day is hard work, but it's heart work. You do the hard work with your heart and all of your heart because you recognize the service you provide is spirit-filled work, because you do your work for the least of these, protecting the promise, the vows that we made as Americans. And while you do that, we celebrate you today, and we know this. Please understand clearly, we always celebrate the work that you do. Because as I said previously, what would we do in Georgia if you did not exist? Imagine, if you will. But what more must we do as Georgians? The work that you do every day ensures that we will forever be true to the one vow that we make as a democracy: justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Colvin. I can think of no better presentation to follow. There was so much data in there, everyone. I'm the Chief Data Officer. I was thrilled with that. So I invite our other panelists to come up, and we're going to chat with you today. I'm going to move mics. I think these are on. Can everyone hear us? Wonderful. Thanks again, Justice Colvin, for those remarks. I'm Holly Stevens. I'm the Chief Data Officer at the Legal Services Corporation, and I'm excited to be here. When I was asked to moderate this panel, I was just so excited about medical legal partnerships. Before I joined LSC, I was at Children's Law Center, which has a large medical legal partnership, and we did data and evaluation work around that medical legal partnership for about 10 years. And so I'm so excited to be back with my MLP crowd and to share with you today. There are about 450 medical legal partnerships in the US right now. Some of them have been operating for more than 20 years, and yet we still call them innovative, when probably they should be the standard of care. And so we're excited today to talk more about what Georgia's medical legal partnerships look like and the structure, and tell you some client stories. And before we start, we're going to have an inspiring video, I think.
There was a case of a child that needed a heart transplant, and certain things needed to happen legally for the child to have the heart transplant.
The transplant team recommended that the mother needed to give guardianship to the grandmother because the mother was not, and understood that she was not financially stable to care for a child who had a heart transplant. That would be something that we could step in and help with. The mother was on board because she knew it was a life or death situation, and so we discussed an emergency modification of custody, and that entailed filing a petition, and if all the parties consented, getting a consent order. There was also a biological father in the picture. However, he was in jail, and so I went to the jail to get his consent because it was an emergency situation. I did not want there to be a holdup with the court system in regards to notifying the biological father. This was also the same day that a huge snowstorm was coming into Atlanta, and so I was trying to fight the snowstorm, and I made it to the jail and had the deputies there deliver the paperwork to the biological father, and because he'd been speaking to the mother, he signed off on everything as well.
And the child had the transplant. The child's alive. It's got a beating heart. You can think about what an incredible thing that is. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta is inviting lawyers into the hospital. There's a doctors' foundation in which doctors contribute to a fund. And through our work at HELP and Children's Healthcare, they've decided to use the doctor's own money to help fund a position for a year, a staff attorney. The power of a legal document that we can do routinely, that we have the expertise to do routinely, and that we can get to help someone, it was just profound.
MLPs have a evidence base that's building from research that it's increasing patient health, decreasing costs, and increasing kind of knowledge of both lawyers and medical partners that are participating in these MLPs. And so today we're excited to welcome Malik Hines, staff attorney from the Georgia Legal Services Program. We have two MLPs, one that's more than 6 years old, and the one Malik is from is just celebrating its 1-year anniversary, I believe. That's with McKinney Medical Center, and that's a Health Resources and Services Administration, I always get that wrong, HRSA funded, federally qualified health center in Waycross, Georgia, Ware County. And I don't know where that is, but I'm told that that is the southeastern corner of the state. So we're excited to learn more about that. And then we have Catherine Morris and Dr. Stan Sonu from the Health Law Partnership, which is quite a long-standing partnership. I think y'all have been around for about 17 years. 20 years. And Catherine is a staff attorney, and Dr. Sonu is the medical director, as part of the medical director for the Child Advocacy and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and also the assistant professor of internal medicine and pediatrics at Emory University School of Medicine, and is a primary care provider. Probably the most fun job there on that list, right?
Yes.
So why don't we start with the why? Why don't you tell us a little bit, let's center this in the people that you work with, and tell us about an example of the collaboration between medical and legal teams that had a significant impact on your children or family's well-being. Malik, should we start with you?
Okay. So I think one big example is the way it works is just like the video described, the novelty to most of our clients is, oh, wow, there's an attorney at the medical center or at the hospital. And I think that's a very big thing because the access to attorneys is so scarce in the communities that I serve. My office, the Brunswick Regional Office, we serve about 17 counties, and we are very few and far between, absolutely. Another big thing is they're just very happy that we're free, or at least reduced cost legal services for some of those instances. I would say the medical legal partnership, one big example, one of my clients, she was just getting a regular checkup, but the doctor noticed some bruises on her arms and, her body. So the doctor asked my client, would she like to talk to an attorney about everything? With domestic violence survivors, speaking about their story is one of the barriers to them coming forth just because, reliving that trauma is, traumatizing, of course. So thankfully, though, she consented to coming to my office, and, she was actually my first temporary protective order that I did. So, that's just one big example of how it comes from doctors to me. And that's just one good example.
That's a great example of how to leverage the trust between the doctors and the lawyers.
Absolutely.
Catherine and Dr. Sonu, an example from your MLP?
Well, Dr. Sono is making me tell the story, but it was this. I think one of the cases that really impacted us a lot emotionally in our unit. It was a young woman or young lady, girl. She was 10. She had sickle cell, which is a lifelong disease. The mother called up, freaking out because they were worried about their child's health, but also the financial stability of the family, and that Medicaid had turned down the bone marrow transplant that the doctors had recommended, which would have cured her sickle cell. The sickle cell bone marrow transplant, I've since learned, is a very, it's almost like lightning in a bottle. You have to have the perfect donor and everybody has to be the perfect age. And she had a sister who was the perfect age, and she was the perfect age. And they were a perfect match, and it was, the doctors were so excited to even have this option, and they did a lot of testing, a preoperative testing to make it happen, multiple MRIs. Went so far as going out of state for a fertility preservation procedure, which was the MRIs were all covered by the Medicaid carrier, and even the fertility preservation was partially covered, all to prepare her for this bone marrow transplant. And then the mother got a letter saying, because you don't have severe sickle cell, because you haven't had a stroke, and because you're not in organ failure, we're denying the bone marrow transplant. This little girl was, I'm told, heading down that path, but had the disease been allowed to progress to that path, the bone marrow transplant would not have been successful, because she would have been older, she would have been compromised, and the doctors really, they wrote the most beautiful letters to the insurance carrier Medicaid carrier, before we were even involved. I mean, talk about building your case for you. As we all know as lawyers, usually the hardest part is building the case, right, as litigators. The doctors did it. They built the case. It was right there, and they handed it to us, but they weren't able to affect the reversal of the decision of the Medicaid carrier. So we, with a lot of help with a lot of people, legal aid, Pam Kraler, my boss, Charlie Bliss was involved. We submitted a fair hearing request to the State Office of Administrative Hearings, and it took about a month of us. Then the Medicaid carrier hired an attorney who we knew, so we were going back and forth with him, talking, and he's a reasonable guy. And then about a month after we filed the fair hearing request, we got word. Okay, and by the way, as we were pulling their documents, they had incorrect diagnoses in the paperwork. There's it hadn't been processed in a efficient way by the Medicaid carrier in making that assessment. So anyway, I think I told the lead, in the beginning, she got the sickle cell transplant in the end, because we were able to file that fair hearing appeal. And I think that the thing that makes it such a great case is so many, I came from private practice. So many times when you're doing this kind of work, working with doctors, there's so many barriers. I'm sure Malik can say this too, to
Absolutely.
getting to the doctors. You know what I mean? There's a lot of gatekeepers, there's a lot of general counsels out there, but in a medical legal partnership, we have such great access to the doctors. And these doctors were the ones calling us and saying, help us with this situation. And so because of that partnership, because of the trusted relationship, this little girl was able to get her bone marrow transplant, and I'm told is doing quite well. So that was a happy day for us.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I do want to underscore that without this bone marrow transplant, this child is headed for literally a lifetime of pain and complications and different kinds of organ failure. I'm also an adult physician. I work at Grady, and I work on the sickle cell unit sometimes, and I'm caring for those 20 to 40-year-olds who have sickle cell disease who didn't get a chance to have a bone marrow transplant. So what Catherine is sharing is no small feat. Not only did it basically change this child's entire health trajectory, but imagine the millions of dollars saved as well to the health system. And the second thing I want to underscore here is the physicians were extremely dedicated to this patient's care, but they had no idea of what it would take to navigate through the weeds of Medicaid, state Medicaid policy, and who to contact and proceedings and this and that. So it wasn't for lack of passion, it was an educational and experiential barrier. And I think this example really highlights why MLPs are so critical, why they sit in a niche that cannot be replicated, why physicians can never do what happened in this case. The case I want to share is a recent one, and it reflects some of the educational aspects of our partnership. We also partner with Georgia State College of Law, and they have a HELP clinic, or medical legal partnership clinic, for their students. And a few weeks ago, the students were busy preparing a case for a child who has cystic fibrosis, who was starting to experience more complications. This child had just come out of the toddler years, and the family was very economically challenged, needed equipment that they couldn't afford, that Medicaid wasn't paying for directly. And the family had applied for SSI and were denied. And the family had appealed and were unsuccessful there. And so the students got together with the law students got together with our medical students, and Lisa Bliss and myself, we overseed some of their research and preparations. And what we basically saw was it was apparent that the SSI department, I don't even know what to call it, the entity over there, did not seem to have the appropriate, most up-to-date paperwork. They were actually making their decision based on paperwork submitted when the child was a couple months old, and only a few months old. And this child, with cystic fibrosis, complications they tend to accumulate over time. So it made sense why they wouldn't approve it then. Long story short, we resubmitted with an affidavit solicited from the child's pulmonologist, lung specialist, and they had the hearing, I think, a few weeks ago. They were persuasive to the judge. The judge not only agreed to approve SSI for the family, but agreed to back pay from the point of birth to the present. So it was a really successful outcome, and it taught these students what it means to advocate, and you could just hear from them, you could feel their energy of how satisfying it was to be a part of something like this, where they felt like they were meaningfully participating, not just in a justice-related issue, but something that actually affected the health and the well-being of the child and an entire family. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing those stories. It's always great to hear kind of about the partnerships themselves and who it's benefiting and who we're here to serve. And at the same time, all MLPs look very different. They serve different populations. They have different funding sources. There's different medical partners and legal partners. Can you guys get in the nuts and bolts a little, tell us how your MLPs are structured?
Okay. Catherine, if you don't mind me starting again. So my medical legal partnership, basically 2 days out of the week, I head to the McKinney Medical Center located in Waycross, Georgia. They also have, a lot of different offices in Folkston, sorry for looking at my notes, Folkston, Alma, Kingsland, and Hunter, Georgia. So I basically just go there and do my office hours for the day in the McKinney Medical Center. And there is no real referral structure from the patient's perspective, except for the doctor. So it's completely walk-in. A lot of things in rural community, they get spread by word of mouth. So there's a free attorney at the medical center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is the premise for how a lot of my clients have come to me. But we also do a lot of promotion in the newspaper in Waycross. So I think one of the big things is the structure is the community partners itself. Obviously, I'm the staff attorney working there, but Mr. Ira Foster and Rachel Henderson are the two progenitors of this project, along with the Medical Legal Partnerships Medical Center, their chair, Ms. Ola Smith. So they really come together and make, the funding and everything happen. But in terms of the ground level, that's my job to sort of advocate for my clients. And a lot of times I'm going out into the community, to the senior center, to a food market, just to kind of put our face out there, because some of them never even know that there's a free attorney in existence until they talk to me. I spoke a little bit about how the doctor referrals work. So those are, obviously confidential. If a patient chooses not to be referred to me for whatever reason, because in that same sense, they may not feel comfortable coming forward with their issue right now in terms of domestic violence and such, then nothing happens. But if they do, then they get referred to me, and we start the intake process from there. I already get a glimpse of what the legal problem will be. And that helps me a lot, but it also helps my clients from not having to reiterate everything that's going on with them. I've done a podcast before on Facebook just to get me out there. So really, in terms of advertising and advocating that I'm at the medical center, that is bought with a lot of good faith and, social capital with the community partners. Yeah, so 2 days out of the week I'm there, but obviously during the other days I'm able to come to the McKinney Medical Center. One of our paralegals mans a different medical legal partnership. She mans a different office for McKinney Medical Center. And she does a lot of intake there, but she also will do a lot of intake for me in terms of if there's a will that needs to be executed or drafted, I will drive to Folkston and do that with her. So we have a very good system of being in the rural communities that are far away, because most of the areas that I'm serving are about 2 hours or at least 1 hour away from our Brunswick Regional Office, which is where I'm at mostly.
Thanks, Malik. How about help? You guys have a very interesting structure with a lot of people involved. How does it work?
You want to say, or should I say? We have 3 legs to our medical legal partnership. We are Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and Georgia State College of Law. And we have an attorney at every one of the CHOA campuses. Not every one, I shouldn't say. We have one at Hugh Spalding, Arthur Blank, CAB. I'm at Center for Advanced Pediatrics. And Scottish Rite has our main office with our legal director, Pam Cradler. And we get all of our referrals from the hospital. A lot of it's phone calls from parents that doctors and social workers have referred to us. We do distribute and try to do outreach within the hospitals. We're starting to do some outreach as well in the community at some, I went to a Sickle Cell Foundation event. We went to, I'm going to be going to a disability nonprofits fair in January to talk about our MLP. But I think it's amazing that you are able to handle everything that walks in the door in your office hours.
And I mean, we turn down a lot of cases as well,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's just a criminal matter, and we don't do criminal matters or DUI or something, but at least a place for them to know somebody is there to talk to is kind of what we try to make the McKinney Medical Center be.
Yeah, and because of the partnership with Georgia State, we're also really lucky to get a lot of data on our program, which is amazing. But what do you have to add, Dr.
Well,
Sommer?
on our side, most of our physicians and trainees have been educated on the topic of social determinants of health. I think, and I want to sidebar real quick, and we have to give credit to our founders, Bob Pedagano and Sylvia Cayley, who very courageously in the early 2000s, when there weren't many MLPs around, advocated to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, or what would become Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, to start an MLP. And that was because Bob Pedagano, who is this hardened PICU doctor with an handlebar mustache, was sick and tired of seeing children come in the sickest of presentations, when the root cause and the root cause would be something socially preventable. And so it was really his passion from the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta side that inspired this widespread education on the importance of social determinants of health. So our physicians and our providers and our social workers are all trained to recognize when there is a health-harming social issue, specifically a health-harming legal need. And we've done a lot of work over the years to raise awareness about HELP. And so if I'm in primary care and I'm seeing a child and the parent expresses an issue about housing, let's say the child has some kind of immunodeficiency or poorly controlled asthma, and they live in Section 8 housing with broken plumbing, maybe there's mold that's starting to form under the sink or in the bathroom, that's a flag for me to say, okay, have you talked to the landlord? Yes, but they haven't responded, the property hasn't responded, and then that triggers me to then refer the family to HELP, and they hear the case. We do case acceptance rounds every Wednesday, and then we go from there. So it's really a partnership that has just worked in the past 2 decades, and I think what the thread that kind of holds everything together is just a mutual passion to serve families and children. I'll say, as a physician, I never thought I'd have this much face time with lawyers, and it's like oil and water, doctors and attorneys. If I had to be in a room of lawyers, though, I guess it would be this room. But yeah, it's a great partnership, and I know from firsthand experience, many of our physicians are very appreciative that help even exists. And so one of our larger goals is to see an MLP across every health system, or at least available to every health system in this state. And I think there's a lot of growing support for that.
If I could just add one other element to our MLP that I can't believe I forgot, is we do have an in-service education program where we will come and speak to the clinicians about different topics. So for example, tomorrow I'm giving a continuing education talk to the social workers at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta on special education, which is one of the areas we do a lot of advocacy in. So to really kind of help them pass on information to the families as they're talking to them. And I have to tell you, when you're getting your referrals from doctors and social workers across a huge medical system, the quality of the referrals that we get is shockingly good. I mean, these clinicians are really well educated about what we can help with and what we can't help with. So it's an important factor in making it work efficiently, I think. And we learn so much from them at our case acceptance meetings, because we'll get calls from families with these complicated medical conditions, and we're like, we don't even know what that is. To like, you know what I mean? To start to, and we have Dr. Sonu and his colleagues to educate us.
I just want to note that if we can bring even a small percentage of the energy and commitment that Bob Pedagano can bring to something, if you all know Bob, we're doing a good job. I wish he was here. He's such a great advocate and character, and Sylvia as well. I'm going to skip around because I know we have a lot of questions, but Dr. Sanders, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Sure. So last spring, Georgetown University released a study, and in Georgia, more than 300,000 children were dropped from the Medicaid rolls. Have you seen this in your client population? How has it impacted? Do you have to work on enrollment as well as all of the healthcare issues with the medical legal partnership? How has this impacted you?
Mm-hmm. Last year, I saw a family who is primarily Spanish speaking, and the child hadn't been seen, I think, in a year, and it was odd because the child was very young. So we hadn't seen the child from like 9 months till 2 years. And I saw the child, and towards the end of the visit, the mother had said, "I'm not sure if we're going to be able to see you in the time frame that you've asked us to follow up." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "I can't seem to renew my Medicaid." And she said, "I've tried online, it won't let me through." And so I said, let me see your phone and I'll try. And I typed in all her information and it still wouldn't go through. I called our social worker and I was like, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And so our social worker tried and she couldn't get through. And so in addition to some of the just a lot of families but being unable to renew their Medicaid, the process is clunky, and the process has been itself a barrier to re-enrolling families. This is, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but it's a disaster for population health. There's so much evidence out there that has demonstrated the benefit of health insurance, health coverage for children especially. It is the number of touch points that a pediatric provider has with a child and family in those first 5 years of life outshines any other touch point with any other professional entity. For example, for an infant, I see that infant at the newborn visit, 1 month, 2 month, 4 month, 6 month, 9 month, 12, 15, 18, 2, 2.5, 3, and that's almost 10 visits right there. All of those visits are opportunities to catch developmental delays, to ask about social needs, to not just address the physical health concerns, but think holistically or think about that child's health holistically. And all of those touch points has been demonstrated through research to prevent or really alter developmental trajectories of the child. So there's this one study that was done out of Iowa where they took mothers who had achieved a high school education or below, and they compared those mothers who had insurance coverage and those who didn't. And for those families who had insurance coverage, their children's reading levels and educational preparedness was better, far better than those children who came from families who didn't have that health coverage. And the only difference between these families, we're controlling for the maternal education, the only difference was insurance coverage in the last 5 years. And so there's all kinds of indirect benefits with insurance coverage, with those touch points, with the pediatric provider. It's not just about preventive medicine, but it's really about holistic care. And these days, pediatricians, we're trained to assess educational outcomes because educational outcomes, speech, language, social skills, fine motor development, gross motor development, these are all markers and signals of health, again, in that holistic sense.
I think MLP is one of the things that you're talking about a lot here, and that the field talks about is this preventative lawyering too, these opportunities missed to set up the child or other patient and families for success. Malik, I wonder what you're seeing in the population that you serve in a more rural community, and not just with a pediatric population. How does that look in your community?
So I think in rural communities, just in general, research shows that rural communities are, older, but also have less access to healthcare and also tend to be more economically, disenfranchised. And that is what I see in a lot of my clients. The majority of my clients are more in the senior range, but also their technology savviness is a lot different from people who may be in the same economic situation, but they live somewhere like Atlanta. I would think one of the main things is just the colloquial understanding of the law is a lot different in the rural communities, because now in Atlanta, at least, kind of everybody has an idea of what lawyers do, and they at least have some theories from Law and Order and everything like that. But it's very much brand new to most of my clients what I'm even talking about or what the situation is. I'm from North Carolina, so I'm from the South, but obviously Georgia is a little bit more South. And I think one of the things I learned that came with that was what this work will require of me, but also what it will require of my clients. It requires a lot of bravery of them to even come talk to an attorney, because every legal thing they've ever done has been negative in their view. It might have been an eviction attorney who they didn't have somebody, or it might have just been, lawyers know we have a bad rap in society in general. So, that crossing that barrier, but also, for me, it took a lot of empathy for me, not necessarily that I felt a different way about it, but just that they're not being apathetic or lazy when they're being paralyzed by their situation. I remember just one quick anecdote before I, pivoted back. One of the client came to me and he said he got a letter and it was like something legal, and I was like, okay, well, what does it say? And I was just, tell me what it says. And then I realized he could not tell me what it says because he could not read it. And he was a man older than I was, so that made me take a step back from law school, undergrad, all the high school and schooling that I've done, and understand that like some of my clients are at a situation where they really cannot help themselves in that basic sense. So now I'm reading all the letters and making sure that everybody understands, but I think they appreciate a lot more of how I can take it down from the law school level and just tell them like, here's what the situation is legally, in a way that they can understand, because a lot of times my clients just feel like they're being swept away with the system. We have so many deadlines and stuff where they might have just defaulted on a divorce because they didn't answer fast enough, or because they got too nervous about the Social Security deadline, they never even did anything with it, and it's been passed already, so they can't appeal. So understanding that it's a lot different for them to even come to me helps me a lot, because I understand now, like, I have to appraise where they are in their journey so I can appraise how I can help them, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Malik. we won't have any data on that core relationship and trust, but one thing we know about MLPs is this focus on data with healthcare partners. And philanthropy leaders also are caring more and more about investing their dollars. What are they getting for their money? How, especially with the health partnership and the law school and all of the partners and researchers that you have, what data are you all collecting so that you can demonstrate the impact, so that you can tell the story, hopefully build funding and the stakeholders and support?
Yeah.
We start with medical, then we'll start with legal data.
Well, at the Health Law Partnership, one thing that we're really proud of, it's kind of a feather in our cap, is the research and evaluation infrastructure and commitment over time. And I think that's been a big part of why our partnership has been able to sort of crystallize and fashion its identity as a part of the health system, at least from my side of things. We have a very robust evaluation process. We partner with the Georgia Health Policy team and are collecting data all the time. So we collect data at the client level, not just with client outcomes, but client satisfaction. What was the process like for you? Any suggestions there? We definitely track healthcare dollars saved or healthcare utilization. We look at that from different angles. So one data point I can give you is that in 2023, for the 40 or so families who we had 12 months of before help data and 12 months of post-help data, before the inpatient cost on aggregate for those 40 families was about $2 million before they got plugged in with help. In the 12 months after help, the aggregate cost was $200,000. So help wasn't the only difference that happened in those families' lives, but it certainly contributed, again, to addressing those more upstream causes that continue to get people sick, and especially children who might have a chronic condition. So we're tracking healthcare dollars saved, and that's like music to people, leadership's ears. When they hear that, they kind of sign everything. We also track data on the provider level, making sure that providers are informed in how to make appropriate referrals. One thing that trips providers up all the time is guardianship, and because we learn nothing about guardianship in medical school. I just thought there was one type of guardianship. I didn't know there was supportive decision-making and all of these other levels of guardianship that existed. So on the aggregate, we pull all of these evaluation metrics into an annual summary, and then from there, we look through the data to say, where can we improve? Where are our gaps in our reach? Where can we better educate our stakeholders, and how can we persuade potential funders to get on our vision? Like I said, we want to grow. We don't want to just grow within our organization and our capacity within Children's Healthcare Atlanta, but we really, because we have firsthand seen the benefit of an MLP and how much it can impact the families' lives, we want to see this really extend beyond our health system borders across the entire state of Georgia. So we think that this data can really move the needle on that.
Well, of course, we enter all of our LSC outcomes into legal server. So that's one way of tracking things. But also, we're so lucky to have the partnership with Georgia State, where they follow any family that is willing to participate in the study, and we ask them at intake if they're willing to participate, and it's completely involuntary. Gets a call or an email from Georgia State to see how effective we were at our representation. And of course, we track the kinds of disabilities that or diagnoses that the children were, because we're a pediatric MLP, the children coming through our program have, what kind of cases we have, and Georgia State does a beautiful job analyzing that data for us.
Catherine, do you feel like you all are engaging in that same process on the medical side to kind of review your practices and try to learn from them on the legal side?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're definitely, it's like We all think we're doctors too now, pretty much.
You are, that's right, yes. Malik, as a growing MLP, are you guys incorporating data and learning into your process?
So, absolutely. So I, get my wonderful regional operating manager, Marika Leroy, to, make a panel, I guess a table for me just so I can kind of see, after we do our LSC time, of course. So as of now, from September to January, and I just started with Georgia Legal Service Program last July, I've seen about 60 people at the McKinney Medical Center, and that's on top of my usual caseload that I have, outside of that. Of course, that's anybody who comes in for whatever reason, so we do have it to where, who I've served. So around that number is about 35 closed cases about there. About 10 of them were cases that we just don't do. I know like 2 DUIs where, we just don't do those, and some criminal things, but also some issues where their legal, their legal situation wasn't something we could remedy. So those are kind of the ways where we miss people or we end up having to reject or just kind of do a counsel and advice letter. But in terms of, just in general, the work that we do in terms of helping people get on the public benefits is a benefit to the taxpayers at the long run that they see. I don't know the specifics of those numbers, but I do a lot of food stamp applications that I've helped people with. Even though that is technically outside of legal representation, I think these jobs negatively get typecast as social work attorney work, but I think in that kind of jab at it lies the beauty of what we actually do, where we help people in ways that aren't just going to court with them. I've had a lot of seniors where, hey, can you just send an email to somebody for me because I don't know if they're going to honor my warranty request versus yours. And sure enough, the tub company 100% did when I sent the letter. Or really they just want somebody to explain a letter to them that they got from the Food Stamp Corporation about, they really do make too much money to get food stamps, but they wanted somebody to explain it to them just so they weren't, being cheated out of the benefits that they deserve. So, in terms of the actual numbers, I've seen about 65 people just coming in and out of the McKinney Medical Center this year. But, in terms of the dollars, I think for our individual clients, it's invaluable for them just to have me there. But of course, we do get, Social Security, SSI, determinations where they get, an amount of money, even though those aren't necessarily livable wages all the time. But any amount really does help our clients at that level. Even a $200 food stamp, application, that goes a long way for some of my clients who they wouldn't have had any way to get food without that. So that's all I have kind of say about numbers.
Yeah, I think any way of thinking about it at the beginning is so helpful, just as you establish the partnership. To close out our conversation, we're running out of time already, and we could stay up here and chat all day. What advice would you give to people who are starting an MLP or want to get involved in pro bono, or doctors, people who are on the edge, not too sure? What parting remarks would you like to leave the audience with?
Okay, I'll go first. So I would, obviously just the importance of what our role does, just because a lot of times, one of the barriers is having to go to another place, having to go from this building to this building or this street to this street. And the way that somebody can easily have their, medical situation checked out and then walk 10 feet and then get, talk to me and I help them with their eviction, that makes a world of difference to the clients. I think in terms of, entities and other people trying to start these sorts of medical legal partnerships, understanding the value of it comes, on the back end through a lot of investment, but for the clients and the people, it's immediate. And that's what I would say.
I mean, I could not agree with you more, Malik. It's the smallest, we think maybe it's such a small impact is a huge impact to them. I think that, HELP has been around 20 years, way before anybody up here's involvement. Some of the people out in the audience were around for it, but I think having stakeholders at the highest level be on board and want it and driving things, because there are going to be significant things barriers to making it happen. Navigating patient confidentiality, navigating technological difficulties as far as combining medical record systems, and it's a complicated partnership. It's like cats and dogs. They're just not used to being with each other and they think about things very differently. And I think when you have buy-in from the top, you're able to overcome some of those barriers.
One of the design features of our social system is we're in silos. And healthcare and certainly the justice system are siloed from each other. And I think the first case, going back to that first case that Catherine shared, it's such a poignant example of why, if we want to do the best for our families, we cannot operate in silos. So I think the one piece of advice, so I have, I know I look like I'm 21, you know, but I've been in this field since 2011. And the reason I came into medicine was to care for the underserved and be a part of caring for underserved communities. I have experimented, or I've done research in different aspects of this, you know, screening for social determinants, trauma-informed care, and I have not experienced something as tangibly productive as an MLP. There is data, it's research-backed, it is interprofessional, it works, it saves money, it sort of checks all those boxes. And so we are, I think, in a position for MLPs across the country to take this to scale and really appeal to even payers, insurance providers. Hey, let's think about an MLP because it can actually save your MCO, your ACO money in the long run. So I think my one piece of advice is the story tells itself. So tell the story, cast the vision, and the people who are passionate about this and the work of justice and caring for families will come out of the woodworks. There's, like I said, research, data, infrastructure, there's training, all the pieces are there, but we need people to be the laborers and you know, reap the harvest. Yeah.
Thank you. I think on that note, kind of removing the barriers and the silos, I don't think anyone could have said it better. It's got something for everyone, data, research, great stories, and great clients and doctors and professionals involved. Please join me in thanking the panel. And we'll welcome Ron Flagg up for the next panel.
Look at you. I don't want to keep going back.
Whiplash going back and forth.
Okay, if we could gather ourselves together, please. I am Ron Flagg, President of Legal Services Corporation. Casey and Seth, I think we have a pretty tough act to follow, but here we are. Let's thank Holly and Catherine, Malik, and Dr. Sonu again for that tremendously enlightening and moving conversations about embedding lawyers in healthcare to improve patient outcomes. And we're going to double down on that theme, at least the theme of bringing together different professions and industries and collaborating on access to civil legal services. In this instance, we're changing our focus to the business community and how powerful it can be when corporate leaders take up the torch of equal access to justice. Given the dimensions, the gargantuan dimensions of the justice gap, we know that legal aid providers and social service providers and even doctors acting alone in silos, as Dr. Sonu was referring to, can't do it alone. We need everybody on board. And we know that advocates from all fields and all sectors are needed, and members of the business community can be among the most powerful and strongest voices and most influential actors in expanding access to justice. And we are fortunate to have two such leaders with us today. Seth Bruckner is Vice President of Legal for UPS Healthcare. Seth is responsible for a team of lawyers and other professionals who negotiate new business contracts, amendments, and other legal documents for UPS Healthcare, a $10 billion internal division of United Parcel Service. Seth, importantly, is also president of the board of directors for Georgia Legal Services. Casey Goebel is assistant general counsel for the Home Depot, which is headquartered here in Atlanta. Casey manages the company's commercial class actions, real estate and construction litigation, and antitrust recoveries, and oversees the customer litigation group. Again, importantly for today's discussion, Casey also serves as treasurer of Atlanta Legal Aid's board of directors. Welcome and thank you to both of you for being here. So you both have what at least sound to me like substantial and probably pretty time-consuming day jobs. So I think the question that jumps to my mind, and maybe you ask yourselves and other people in your personal lives ask you this as well, why do you do this, this other work in civil legal aid? So Casey, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I do it because I'm lucky. I'm lucky that my parents have been married for 50 years. I've never really been hungry except when I'm just hungry. And maybe every day at 4 o'clock, that's a different issue. I've never been hungry. I've never had worried about where I'm going to go to sleep, what clothes I'm going to wear, can I show up at school the next day. But I grew up knowing people that didn't have water in their homes, that didn't have food on their table, that didn't have parents that loved them. And so I'll also fully admit that I am not brave enough or selfless enough to serve those people for a living. That's why I try to sell you hammers. But I hope that my board service and my participation with Atlanta Legal Aid and other organizations like it is a little bit of a way to give back to someone else who isn't as lucky as I am.
Seth?
So when I think about the why, I think of it in terms of two buckets. And the easy bucket is sort of the personal, and the broader bucket is the professional. The personal one is easy for me. I do it because I was always taught that that's what you should do. You should give back. And it's something that's important to my parents to tell to me. It's important for me to tell my kids and to show them by doing. But you guys want to hear about the professional stuff. This panel is about corporate America. So let me tell you a little bit about UPS. UPS, from the moment I joined the company 22 years ago, has a culture of giving back, and more specifically, giving back in the communities in which we operate. We're probably one of the largest employers in the U.S. We're certainly the largest unionized employer in the world. We have over 500,000 employees around the globe. And yet we don't sell hammers, we sell service. And when I speak on panels like this, my favorite question to ask is, how many people know they're a UPS driver? And invariably, two things happen, right? So half the room raises their hands, and all the ones that raise their hands, they're all smiling because they're emissaries of the company, and they live and operate in all of our communities. We are told to give back to our communities, our local communities, and here in Georgia, that means supporting entities like Atlanta Legal Aid or Georgia Legal Services.
So I'd like to talk a bit about the interplay between, I refer to it as your day jobs, but you may think of as your board services as part of your day jobs, but the interplay between your day jobs and your board service for Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services. In what way do your board experiences affect your pro bono work, your volunteerism, and your corporate leadership roles? And then the flip side, how do your experience as in-house legal counsel influence your board work? Seth, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so the first question was how does my board service influence my time at UPS? I joined Georgia Legal Services, the board, about 7 years ago. I got a call from our general counsel at the time saying, hey, we've helped out Atlanta Legal Aid, we've helped out Georgia Appleseed, the Justice Project. There's so many different wonderful organizations in the Atlanta and Georgia area, but we've never really supported GLSP. It's time for us to support GLSP. How would you like to join the board? I said, wonderful, great opportunity. I was just rolling off another board, and it was time for me to take on another opportunity. And I will say that in my prior board experiences, they were really just write a check, kind of check the box sort of thing. Georgia Legal Services was a little different. From the moment I joined, there was another board member, Judge Susan Cole. She's retired now. She was a judge down in, let's see, what was she in Waynes? Gainesville. That's right. That's right. She took me under her wing, and one of the very first things I learned when I joined the board was that there was an internal investigation going on, and no one had ever had any experience about internal investigation. But that's what I did for a living. That's what I do today. Well, I don't do it anymore, but I did it at the time at UPS, and I said, okay, I actually know how to do this. Here's what we need to do, this, and this. And it was so gratifying to be able to take that experience and share it within GLSP. The problem is, as soon as I did that, Judge Cole said, you're pretty good. I need you to volunteer to be on this board, and we need to rewrite the bylaws, so maybe you should help with this. And suddenly I got very involved with GLSP.
That's the danger of doing a good job.
I guess. But it was also the joy of doing a good job. And now I've forgotten what the second question was.
So the second part is, how do your experiences, well, you've kind of
I think
answered.
I answered that.
Yeah, and how does your board work sort of infuse your work at UPS Healthcare?
It's meaningful within the company. We as every company does, we are annually reviewed as employees on the things that we do. And one of the cultural touch points that's important about working at UPS is community involvement is important. And you need to be able to demonstrate community involvement. And it's not just writing a check. It's being involved and being engaged, again, in the local communities in which we operate. Being a representative of both the community and UPS. Very proud of both of those things.
Casey?
Sure. I'll kind of focus on the second part. And one thing I think that some folks forget, either on boards or kind of in life, is that nonprofits are businesses. They are 501c3s. They are corporations. They may not turn a profit, but they are a business. I work in a business. And so what I hope, one of the things that I can bring is remembering that. And those same fiduciary duties that the board members of the Home Depot have, I have to Atlanta Legal Aid. And so hopefully some of the questions I ask in my day job that folks bring to us in the legal department in our day job, or we hear discussed, around the office, are questions I can ask, are ideas I can bring to the table, are issues I can spot. Because not forgetting that it is a business. The business is serving others, and then we can't forget that, but you also can't forget if you don't have the business, you can't do the service.
Yeah, and I would add, you're the treasurer of Atlanta Legal Aid, and I can guarantee you, I've talked to probably every executive director of the LSC grantees across the board, and not a single one went to law school or became executive director because they wanted to master accounts receivable or deferred revenues. And so getting outside expertise to help with that is really very, very important, and particularly from the perspective of a funder. Casey, the National Legal Aid and Defender Association, particularly their corporate advisory group, annually engages in a signature gathering effort to put together a letter to Congress, which with dozens and even hundreds of names of corporate representatives advocating for robust funding for LSC. When John Levy and I show up in Congress, people say, well, of course, they're the chair and the president of LSC, but when they get a letter from the chief legal officers or other senior people in corporate America, it makes a difference. But what your colleague, Teresa Wynn Roseborough, is a signatory on behalf of Home Depot. Why do you think it's important for business leaders to voice support for legal aid?
Well, I can say it's always a good idea to listen to Teresa. If anyone here has not met her, she's a phenomenal human, a phenomenal lawyer. Very close ties to legal aid too, and she's not even here, and I'm saying that, so it's true. So I think there's a couple of reasons too that come to mind that I'll focus on, and the first one is that at least for us, legal aid's clients are our customers and they're our associates, and so. This holds true. I learned this at the law firm I was in before I came to Home Depot, and this rings true at Home Depot too. But we have a duty to the folks that come and shop in our stores to also support this community. They support us. Without our customers, we don't exist. And so we have a duty to give back to the communities that serve us so well. And in turn, that community, these organizations like Legal Aid, like GLSP, can give back to our customers and to our associates, because some of our associates, which is what we call our employees, also may be in need of legal services as well. So it's a return on the investment the community makes in us. We reinvest back in that. I think the second thing is because, both UPS, and I'm so glad to be up here with Seth and UPS, it's another great Atlanta institution. We are big companies. We hire a lot of lawyers. It's not just the two of us running these legal departments. And so I'd like to think that we have some influence on our outside counsel who are both attorneys and firms that can give back not only monetarily, but also in a pro bono fashion as well. And so knowing that we support it, that we may call up one of their associates to give them experience, exposure to their client by taking a pro bono project, or also to coming with us at a fundraiser, inviting us to a fundraiser or sponsoring a fundraiser, or just coming out and attending, come to this board meeting, learn about this, let me tell you about this client, I think is an opportunity that we uniquely have being in-house counsel.
Well, I can vouch to that. I was pro bono chair at Sidley Austin for over 15 years. And I knew if I wanted to generate support among my colleagues for a project, if I got a client or two to pipe up and say, this is really important to us, we'll partner with you, the skids were greased. That project was going to be well supported. Seth, UPS, through its foundation, committed to 30 million volunteer hours by 2030. 30 million volunteer hours, that's amazing. And employees already met a goal to give 1 million volunteer hours in support of justice, reform, and equality for Black Americans. How is the legal team contributing to these ambitious goals?
The easy answer is just like every other employee of the company. The legal department is part of UPS. It's kind of interesting, even though we're a large Fortune 50 company, I think we're probably one of the smallest legal departments in the Fortune 50. For a company of our size with over 500,000 employees, I think there are only about 125 legal professionals globally. So that's everywhere. We tend to rely, our model is we rely on outside counsel to support. We keep the plow high, which is a fantastic way to practice law because you get to really focus on the stuff that's important to you. But the legal department is no different than any other department within UPS. We're all expected to give back to the community. You'll hear it time and time again, giving back to the local community. The UPS Foundation is our corporate giving foundation. It's an incredible arm of the organization. I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure that I got the numbers right. Over the last 70 years since it was created, the foundation has provided over $3 billion in contributions to local communities. It has 4 priorities. One is health and humanitarian relief. When the hurricanes hit, we look to give in-kind services because that's what we can provide, and we can provide it quickly. We can't provide the hammers, but we can get them there where they need to go. It is important. Number 2 is equity and economic empowerment, and that drives a lot of the same issues that are driven by legal aid. Local engagement. again, very important, and planet protection. So environmental issues are extremely important to the company as well. The legal department, as I said before, is involved locally in almost every one of the nonprofits, legal nonprofits here in the state of Georgia. I think we've had members of the UPS Legal Department who have served or chaired the Board of Legal Aid, GLSP, the Georgia Appleseed, Georgia Justice Project, just to name a few. And we are all encouraged to do so. That notwithstanding, what we do individually in our roles on those given boards, the General Counsel, supports numerous days of service. And so that's what we do. We will go out and we will go paint a house or plant trees or work on wills clinics. I've over 22 years, I've been involved with so many different clinics, guardian ad litem, you name it. And everyone gets involved. And it's a wonderful opportunity to not only demonstrate the culture, and if the tone at the top is that we give back, everybody understands the importance of giving back. And so I would say that the legal department, just like every other UPS employee, is charged with giving back, and we all do it gratefully because we are so blessed in being able to provide the service that we provide, being able to hire the people that we hire. We provide significant amounts of educational experience, job training experience, because without those people at all stages of economic ladders and diverse backgrounds, we don't look like the communities in which we serve, which is not where we want to be.
That's terrific. Casey, sort of a similar type of story at your day home. The Home Depot Foundation's philanthropic and community service priorities relate to civil legal issues and target groups that often cannot afford legal counsel. The company has invested in improving the lives of veterans and their families, responding to natural disasters, and protecting housing affordability and stability for rural communities and seniors, among other groups. What is something that the Home Depot legal department has done that makes you proud, or you want to tell us about?
I'm not sure we have enough time for me to name everything, but no, it's very similar to Seth's story. It does start from the top down. Again, our general counsel, Teresa, is a historically legal aid volunteer. She will tell you that she is 0-1 at the U.S. Supreme Court, and that was a legal aid case. And she's proud of that. Even she would have liked to have been 1-0, but still, she'll take it. And it really flows down to us. Again, it's not our pro bono work and our giving back is not sort of extracurricular. It is part of our job at the Home Depot. Hopefully you've shopped in our stores, at least you've seen it, maybe a TV commercial, orange aprons. There's a values wheel that we wear over our hearts, and it's there for a reason. And one of those values is giving back. And this is a way that we get to do that. We have in the legal department a number of committees that are for various activities in legal, and the pro bono, there's a pro bono committee. I'm on that committee. And through that, we help encourage our associates, both lawyers and non-lawyers, to be able to get pro bono opportunities, other giving back opportunities. They want to do it non-legally. And we're so fortunate that it is seen, again, as part of what we do on a daily basis. And actually, we have an annual meeting every year, and there is a particular, everyone who's done even 1 hour of pro bono work, we have a pro bono tracker that goes around, that people enter their hours. You get a certificate. People get very excited about them. There's somebody who wins the either the biggest project or the biggest victory or highest number of hours. And so really the thing that the legal department does that makes me the most proud is make this a priority. It's not, I didn't have to get permission to come here today. I'm here. They're very happy that I'm here, that one, I get to give back and do this and see all of you guys who are really doing the good work. But I get to do that and represent Home Depot in that capacity. And so it's giving us the freedom, the opportunity, and encouraging that work, that giving back to our communities.
Thanks. Seth, I want to ask you a question which confronts both in-house lawyers as well as law firm lawyers, which has to do about persuading colleagues to join the effort. And what do you say to your colleagues who want to get involved in pro bono but are nervous about taking cases outside their fields of expertise. Again, something one faces in a law firm as well. Or when you hear a peer say, my division is already stretched thin, I don't think we can spare the time. How do you work your way through those kinds of concerns?
Well, I'll start with the second question first, which is an easy one. If you can't give your time, you can give your wallet, right? So there are lots of ways to contribute, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to give all of your time. Time is precious. We all understand that. That being said, it's not that difficult. And if the impediment is fear, you get over that by starting small. And we provide the clinics and the joint pairings from the law firms and in-house. It's incredibly easy to get involved in pro bono work. It simply is. And in many cases, you have to demonstrate it. You have to be a leader, and then people see that, you know what, it's okay that Seth took a half a day to go speak at a conference, because we encourage that. Or that we did a pro bono project, and no one got in trouble, or no one was forced to take home additional work to do it. In fact, everybody enjoys it, right? It's an opportunity to do something outside of your normal day-to-day. You make it enjoyable. You communicate from the top. Just as Casey's saying, our companies are very similar in the sense that they support all of this, and being supportive of that draws a lot of people in. But the easiest way to get someone over the hump of doing pro bono work is to pair them with someone at a law firm. Tell the law firm, hey, we'd like to do a clinic with you, and whether it's a wills clinic or a guardian ad litem clinic, we've done them all. You can bring skills that you may have from your corporate background, or you're partnered with an outside counsel who has those skills. Makes it very easy. Bite off little pieces, start small, and grow.
Yeah, please.
Can I add something to that? One of the things that we've experienced too, again, and I think you guys too, we have lawyers, we have non-lawyers, but it's also organizations are more than happy to both not only pair you with the law firm, but also give you things that are bite-sized, that are easy. I get emails once a week, once a month from an organization. It's like, hey, if you can do this, we have the form. We just need you to come and put the information in and use your lawyer brain to do it. I'm like, I can do forms. I'm a litigator, so I like to do the litigation things. We have a ton of folks that are like, I never want to see a courtroom. Like, we got you. We have paralegals who are notaries. Guess what? They can do a wills clinic and notarize stuff for people. The organizations in the community have ways to make it very easy for you and your organizations and your employees to go and do these things. Sometimes all you got to do is ask and say, this is the impediment we have. We're really experienced in X, but we're not great in Y. Or we can only do things in one day. Can we come and bombard you with something? People find a way to make that work. And that's a really easy way. Again, it's not scary if someone's there holding your hand, whether it's the organization or whether it's the outside counsel. Someone there can make it very easy.
Another argument that at least I thought was effective, I don't know if it persuaded my colleagues when I was in private practice, is in effect the justice gap. Legal aid programs, not only here in Georgia, but across the country, are turning away half the eligible applicants who come to their door. So the alternative to a healthcare litigator going into landlord-tenant court is not going to be Clarence Darrow. It's going to be that tenant representing themselves. And, by that standard, you might feel a little more confident.
Better than the alternative.
That's life, isn't it? 2024 is a milestone year for LSC, 50th. Atlanta Legal Aid celebrating its centennial. Our anniversary theme, as you see plastered on all over these walls in our stationery, is protecting the promise of justice for all. As a closing question, what is one thing everyone in the audience can do tomorrow to uphold that promise, ensuring that millions of Americans have access to legal resources and support that has a life-changing impact? Seth, why don't we start with you?
Okay, I thought this was an easy one again, and my answer is give, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean give money, right? It means give time, give attention, Right? Think of the issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and the breadth of influence that we all have in our lives. It's a multiplying effect. When you give attention to an issue, others take that issue and they give attention to it as well, and it multiplies. And that's how we drive people to either contribute their time, energy, and money.
Yeah, I had it phrased differently, but Dr. Sonu said it better than I did in my notes, and he said, tell the story. So tell the story. The story I like to tell, I got the chance to work for Legal Aid for 4 months in 2011. I was a fellow there, and it's, with no offense to Home Depot, it's the best job I've ever had. And I can tell those stories from my personal time, from my clients. I'll tear up now if I think about several of them, the stories that I tell. But when you put a face to an issue, when you put a first name or a fake name to an issue and you humanize an issue, we heard about the heart transplant in the video. We've heard about sickle cell anemia. We've heard about guardianship. These are things, but they have a face and they have a name. And then it becomes not this, one, it humanizes the issue, but it also makes it not so much insurmountable. Because maybe I can't save the world, but maybe I can help Susie get what she needs. And so I would encourage everyone who knows, all of you that are on the LSC board, tell your story. The good work that you do that help us and help Legal Aid and GLSP do their good work and help all these people. Tell your story. Those of you that are volunteers, all the EDs that are here, we've got Rita, we've got Steve, we've got Susan, we've got everybody. Tell these stories, tell the stories of the lawyers that do this work, because as Seth said, it's getting that word out there. And again, you can't save everyone, but maybe you can help one person, and then someone else hears that and helps one person. And I will end with quoting Bobby Kennedy, because he talked about ripples of hope. And so you throw a rock into a pond, it creates ripples. Those are ripples of hope. Tell your story, make the ripples.
Please join me in thanking Casey and Seth. And thanks to all of you for being here today and what you do in your day jobs. Many of you I know are with the Georgia Legal Services programs. And as a reward, as I said to Seth before, you do one thing well, you get to do it again. I invite you to our next event, which is coming right up in a few minutes. It is an awards ceremony, a reception, I should say, honoring pro bono awardees from both of our Georgia Legal Services programs, as well as honoring long-serving staff in both programs. We're very excited to honor all of them, and we will be joined by former Georgia Governor Roy Barnes, who will speak, and we're going to be over at Ventanas at 275 Baker Street, 14th floor. I would advise you not to follow me. We may take a circuitous route, but there are others here who will lead you more readily to Ventanas, and I'll try to follow them as well. Again, thank you all for being here.